Okay, let's talk about how to sketch or graph this parabola. Now, if you don't know what a parabola is, just stick around here and you're going to learn a lot about parabolas. And they're pretty friendly graphs. They're not too difficult to sketch, but they're very, very important, especially when we're talking about the topic of quadratic equations, quadratic functions. So if you're studying algebra, and we see we have this x squared. We're dealing with a second degree polynomial. I know that sounds kind of technical, but you need to be able to recognize these type of functions, right? So if you're studying algebra, a huge part of algebra is recognizing what you're dealing with, right? So you're like, what is this thing? Well, it's definitely not a line, so it's something else. Well, this something else is when you have this x squared and no other x. We could have an x here, but really what is telling us, what's driving this problem is this x squared. This means this is a quadratic equation. Now, we do call these things quadratic functions, but this is a quadratic equation. We have a little equal sign here, so we'll call it a quadratic equation. If I change this thing to an f of x, I would describe this as a quadratic function. So all these technical names, all this little terminology kind of out there could be kind of overwhelming, but we don't need to make this that difficult. Okay, so this is a basic skill that you need to know in algebra for sure. Okay, so stick around. Again, we're going to be sketching this. Okay, this is like a introductory type of problem, but we're definitely going to get some important foundations down for parabolas. Okay, all right, so we're going to get to that in just one second, but first let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TabletClass Math. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher, and over several years I've constructed what I like to believe is one of the best online math help programs there is. Of course, I'll let you be the judge of that. If you're interested, you can find a link to a math help program in the description below. Okay, now what is my math help program? Well, basically, I have 100 plus different math courses. So those would include the big courses like algebra, geometry, algebra 2, college algebra, pre-algebra. But I have many, many specialty courses to aid in those of you that are preparing for a particular type of test. So that could be like the GED, SAT, ACT, GMAT, GRE, teacher certification exams, AccuPlacer, CLEP exams. So a lot of you out there are studying math for for a particular exam. So I certainly understand that. So there's a huge need out there for test preparation. Okay. Well, so what I've done is constructed very customized math courses for these particular tests. So I have a lot of courses. So whatever your you know whatever exam that you're studying for, I likely have that test prep course. Okay, so it'd be like nursing exam, et cetera, et cetera. So you just go to my website and check out my course catalog. And if I don't have the course, let me know in the contact form, and I'll kind of give you my best guidance and direct you out to help you out. Now, other people that use my Math App program are those like homeschoolers doing independent full study, or those people who are in a class. Let's say you're taking college algebra, but you're not really connecting with the instruction or the teacher. You can use my program to kind of supplement in that way. Okay. All right. So one thing you need to know. All right. And I'm assuming you're interested in math. You're a math student. So I'm just going to make that assumption and tell you about notes. All right. This is one of my big sticklers as a math teacher. So I call it my golden rule of math. Over decades of teaching this, there's no other more absolute correlation that I've seen. And that is this: those students who take great notes almost always have great grades, and the reverse is true. Those students who always have a sad face at the end of their math course and they're walking around with a D or F. And believe me, teachers get no joy and assigning grades like that. All right, but how did this happen? How did this little sad face situation happen? I can almost guarantee you this person had no notes, sloppy notes, or they were like just underestimated the importance of taking notes. I'm telling you right now, it's one of the top things you need to do. It's not an optional thing. You must take notes. You can't be looking at your friends' notes, just because they write better than you. You got to get off your cell phone, put that little guy away, and concentrate on great notes. When you do that, everything is going to get better. Okay, but in the meantime, if you haven't been taking great notes, which probably a large majority haven't, I have notes that you can study from. So those would include pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and trigonometry. You can find links to those notes in the description of this video. Okay, so let's get into this problem. We're talking about parabolas. Now it's kind of funny that I, draw these little sad faces and happy faces. If you watched some of my other videos, now we're actually going to be using the concept of a sad face with this problem. So some of you are like, well, what is this guy talking about? Well, let's kind of talk about it here for a second. So we're talking about parabolas, right? So let me just kind of quickly sketch out an XY axis. And now the topic or the title of this video is sketch. All right, that's sketch. All right, so we're talking about sketch. Now, I'm not looking to do a precise graph. It doesn't have to be perfect. A sketch is to give me a fairly good representation of what's going on. It doesn't mean to be purposely sloppy. It means that you don't have to be absolute in your shape or points, okay? We just want you to get the main idea of these graphs. But we're talking about quadratic functions here, quadratic equations. These are things with x squared. So like x squared, y equals x squared, or let's say y equals 2x squared plus x plus 7. Okay, this is a trinomial, but it's a quadratic equation, right? Now I could solve this quadratic equation by setting it equal to 0. And then some of you out there will be like, oh, okay, how do I do that? Well, you could factor, or you can use a quadratic formula, etc., right? So all of these kind of type of equations are in the quadratic equation family, and they all have this basic shape associated with them, and that is the parabola, okay? And a parabola is a U-shape type of graph, okay? So you can have, let me just go ahead and start sketching some parabolas out here. You can have a parabola that goes this way, okay? You can have upside down parabolas like this, right? And your parabola can kind of go over here, or it could go over here. So obviously, you're going to have some sort of U shape. Now, by the way, your U's can be like this too. Let me kind of use another color here. You could have very wide U's like so. Okay, that's a parabola. Or you can have very skinny U's like so. So it's a whole range of possibilities what we could do with U-shaped graphs, which we refer to as parabolas in algebra. Now, if you knew that, that's very, very good. Okay, so give yourself a little A plus and a smiley face. You're like, yeah, I knew that, I knew that. Very, very good. Okay, so let's kind of keep developing our knowledge of parabolas, and then we'll get into, obviously, the sketch of this problem. Now, let's take a little U shape right here. This point, okay, this is what we would call like the minimum. It's like the bottom of this U, okay? This point here, or the top of this U right there, is something very important. It's called the vertex, all right? That's called the vertex. And we're going to be interested in wanting to know the location of the vertex. Now, this particular problem, this is a kind of introductory problem. I've done other problems on graphing parabolas. You can check those out in my Algebra and Algebra 2 playlist, and I'll continue to do more examples. So that's why you want to subscribe to my channel, so you're getting all my content. I'm posting material all the time because I'm obsessed with teaching math, and I try to teach it in a clear and understandable way. But anyways, that's beside the point. We're just going to start with a basic introduction to parabolas here, set the foundation up, and then you got to obviously continue practicing more problems. I'm just giving you an overview here, right? So here we have parabolas. This location is called the vertex. And another thing about parabolas that you want to know is that they're symmetric. So if I draw a line through the vertex, this side, okay, is the mirror image of this side. That's called symmetry, right? So parabolas are symmetric. They're not going to go like this, okay? So, you're not going to have anything weird. So when you're sketching these things, you want to keep that in mind, okay? You want to show symmetry to them. Now, let's talk about something about these shapes right here, okay? So here, I indicated that you can have a like a up U like this or a down U, okay? Parabola, right? You can have a parabola like so, opening up or opening down. Now, how do we know that? Well, let's just take a basic parabola, y equals x squared and y equals x squared. Now, these graphs are not these sketches are not the graphs of y equals x squared, but I'm going to make my point here so you understand this. Now, if the sign in front of the x squared, okay, is positive, like right here, we have a positive number. If I have just y equals x squared, that is a positive 1 in front of that. We don't write a positive 1 x squared. X squared is a positive x squared, okay? So when the sign in front of the x squared coefficient, okay, that part of the quadratic equation, if it is positive, and this is the case here, then your parabola is a happy parabola. You see my little face right there? Look at that big smile. There you go. Okay, you just need to know, that's the way I like to teach us. If it's positive, then you have a happy face. You hear it's moving, it's going up like so. Now, the reverse is true, or, basically we could think, well, what is a negative sign? Well, this person's, you don't want to say this is negative. We just don't want to call anybody negative, even parabolas. I'm sure they have feelings as well. But if we have y equals negative x squared, this negative there in front of the x squared is a down face. Okay, this is a sad parabola. Okay, so keep that in mind, and that's going to be a hint. Okay, now in terms of graphing parabolas, there's a lot of different approaches we can take. One, obviously, we need to locate the vertex, and then from there we need to identify whether it's happy or sad, and then we have to start working on the other factors that are involved. Is it wide? Is it skinny? Etc. Okay, so I'll touch on that as we get into this problem now, but these are kind of the foundational concepts. Okay, again, this is a kind of basic problem, right? But I think we know enough now to be able to graph this. All right, so right off the bat, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a happy or sad parabola? Okay, well, I have a negative 4 in front of this x squared, so this is going to be a sad little parabola, so we know that that's going to be the general shape. And the way I'm going to teach you how to sketch this is we're going to first start off with the graph y equals x squared, the most basic parabola you can graph. Okay, so y equals x squared is a happy parabola, okay, and that would look like this, all right, something like this, y equals x squared. Now, as soon as I throw a negative sign in front of that x squared, if I wanted to draw or sketch out another parabola, I would have the parabola, it would just flip, okay? We just call this a reflection along the x-axis, but just think of it as just as a flip. It's the same shape, but it's flipping upside down, okay? So that's y equals negative x squared. Again, this is a sad parabola, okay? So unfortunately, there are sad things in mathematics. This is probably one of them. And, anyways, it is what it is. Okay, now, so that's the basic shapes, right? So this is y equals x squared. Okay, now I'm going to erase this guy right here. So we kind of get the idea here, get the sense of what's going on. Now, if I add a number, okay, to this x squared, if I add a number on the outside of the x squared, let's say plus 3, well, what impact does that have on this basic graph that I started off with? If I add 3 to it, what happens? Well, all you're going to do anytime you're adding or subtracting a number on the outside of this x squared component on a parabola, the graph or the quadratic equation here, this is going to move the graph up or down. Okay, so this is going to move our basic parabola up or down this number. So in this case, we're going to move this parabola up 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then we're going to just keep this same parabola, all right, the same shape, just like so. All right. So if I said, what is the vertex of this parabola, I would locate this point that would be located at 0, 3 is the vertex. All right. Okay, so hopefully, you're getting a sense of that. Now, if I had this here as like minus 7, what would happen? Well, this y equals x squared graph would get shifted down all the way down to negative 7. It would still be a happy graph. It would just kind of do this business, all right? Okay, now, let's continue on. And now let's talk about the impact of this number, not the negative, not the sign, but this number 4, okay? So I'm going to talk about that, and then we will finally graph this example that I had here originally. Okay, so what's going on? We have y equals x squared. If I go y equals 10x squared, Okay, so I'm comparing it to this, y equals 10x squared. Well, what's happening? Well, this number is a lot bigger than the 1. So what happens when we increase these numbers in front of the x squared? Well, what happens there, it makes the parabola skinnier. Okay, so you could just kind of, think of it maybe something like this. All right, it's going to be much, much thinner. Now, as a math teacher, if I'm asking for a sketch and I purposely have a large number there, I want to see it. You need to accentuate this characteristic of what's going on. Again, we're talking about a sketch, all right? But don't give me like a nice u, okay, if it's like a very high number coefficient from the x squared, because then that would, I would start thinking that you don't understand the impact of that coefficient, that you haven't been watching a TabletClass Math YouTube channel, okay? Anyways, so just remember that, and now let's talk about what happens if that number is much smaller. What if I have 1/10 x squared? Interesting, okay? So if you have 1/10 x squared, well, the impact on that is what? Let's just kind of guess, right? Well, if the other one made that skinny, this is less than 1. It's a very, very small number. Yes, you have it right. It's going to become wider, okay? That parabola will become wider, all right? Now, again, we need to understand all these characteristics, and there's other things we need to know how to calculate the vertex and the y-intercept and x-intercept, and there's a lot of things you can calculate the zeros. Let's just quickly talk about, let's say I have a parabola like that, okay? If I asked you to graph this parabola, well, this point is the vertex, okay? Now, there isn't an equation here, but let's just suppose that obviously there is a quadratic equation that goes with this graph. So we could find the vertex, okay? And we can also find these points here, okay? These points actually represent the solutions to this equation. So I would have to solve this quadratic equation, and these would be the x-intercepts. And then here, eventually, this graph goes down and crosses to the y-axis. You can find the y-intercept. You can get much more precise and much more involved. And the graphs, functions, quadratic functions or polynomial functions have something to do also with the type of solutions you're going to be dealing with. So again, there's a lot of related topics when we're talking about quadratic equations, quadratic functions, graphs, etc. But here, finally, we're going to just get a basic graph of this quadratic equation, okay? Real basic sketch. All right, so again, we know now that this is going to be a sad parabola, and it's going to be a little bit thin, okay? It's going to be on the thin side because this number is greater than 1. Okay, so we want to show that, and then I know its y-intercept is going to be 2. So I could start off with the basic, let's just start with, let's forget the negative right now and just get this other graph. Well, let's get a graph. There's a couple different ways you can kind of think about this. This graph is a little bit thinner. So this would maybe be like y equals 4x squared, okay? So you're like, okay, but I got to move this guy up 2. So that would be up 1, 2. So that would be the same graph like so. Y equals 4x squared plus 2, okay? But this has a reflection, all right? It's going to be sad. So finally, all I need to do is flip it, okay? So this is our final graph. This would be y equals negative 4x squared plus 2, okay? All right, so if you didn't know anything about parabolas, quadratic equations, and functions, and their, everything else, hopefully you're going to walk away with a decent amount of knowledge. That's the whole idea behind watching my videos, is to leave you knowing more than you knew coming into the video, right? But again, there's a lot more to this topic, and it's an extremely important topic in algebra. Now, if you were able to ace this problem, you're like, yeah, I knew everything you knew, then definitely give yourself an A+, a gigantic smiley face, at least 3 stars, and 100%, because that is awesome, okay? It shows that you're on the right track, which is probably a pretty good indicator that you're taking notes. Now, some of you out there are like, yeah, note taking, I got this photographic memory. I could just watch the teacher, and I'm one of those people who don't need to study. I hear this all the time as well. I don't need to study, and I always do well on tests. Listen, when you start getting into like the more challenging mathematics, middle school or especially high school mathematics, it's just too much information. Okay, don't don't just listen to me on this one. Okay, um, there's a lot of things I can't do, but the one thing I do pretty well is teach mathematics. Why? Not because I have a degree in mathematics and a master's degree, which I do have all that stuff. It's because I have experience, right? I've seen this over the years, over and over. And you do anything long enough, you're going to, become better at it. And over the years, you just see these trends. So please listen to me on my, note-taking advice. It's going to help you dramatically. And watching these videos is going to help you out as well. So if you feel like you learned something, please consider smashing that like button. That would help me. And if you're new to my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. Been on YouTube for a long time, 10 plus years actually. That's a great platform for someone like myself who's obsessed with teaching mathematics. I have hundreds and hundreds of videos organized on my channel, organized from basic to advanced math. So you can check that out. But if you really want my best help, check out the links in the description. All right, so with that being said, definitely, I wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.